I knew something was off the moment I stepped out of my truck, and the wind stopped. Not slowed. Not shifted direction. Stopped. Out here, that almost never happened. The weather monitoring station sat alone on a low ridge miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dark forest and scrubland that stretched farther than the headlights could reach. Normally, even on calm nights, there was always something a breeze through the pines, the distant hum of insects, the low constant whisper of air moving over the land. That night, there was nothing. Just silence, thick enough that it felt like pressure in my ears. I stood there for a second with the driver's door still open, keys in my hand, listening. Then, the station's exterior lights flickered once and steadied, casting a pale halo around the building and the tall antenna tower beside it. I told myself I was overthinking it. First night nerves. I was the new night technician. Midnight to 8 a.m. Monitor data. Log readings. Perform routine checks. Sit alone with machines that never slept. It was supposed to be the easiest shift on the schedule. The station itself was a squat concrete structure, more bunker than building, designed to withstand weather events that rarely made the news, but always showed up in the data later. Inside were rows of equipment racks, humming softly, and a small control room with monitors displaying live feeds from sensors spread across the surrounding region. Temperature, barometric pressure, visibility, wind shear, atmospheric particulate density. All boring, all predictable. That's what I'd been told. My supervisor, Karen Whitlock, met me just inside the control room door. Late 40s, practical haircut, government-issued jacket that looked like it had survived a decade of storms. She shook my hand once, firm and brief. "Welcome to Nights," she said. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," I answered. She nodded, like that was the correct response, and nothing more needed to be said. She walked me through the basics quickly: where the logs were kept, how often readings needed to be manually verified, which alarms mattered, and which ones were usually false positives. Then, just as she was about to leave, she stopped, reached into the breast pocket of her jacket, pulled out a laminated card. It was about the size of an index card, edges yellowed and scratched like it had been handled for years. No official letterhead, no agency seal, just text typed in a plain block font, single-spaced. She held it out to me without comment. "What's this?" I asked. Karen hesitated. "Not long, but long enough to register. Fog protocols," she said. "You'll want to keep that on you." I took the card. It was warmer than I expected, like it had been riding close to her body all day. "This isn't in the SOP," I said, flipping it over. "Blank on the back." "No," she agreed. "It's not." I waited for more explanation. It didn't come. She glanced at the wall clock: 11:47 p.m. "I need to head out before the access road gets slick," she said. "Satellite's been acting strange tonight. If anything seems off, log it. If alarms trip, follow procedure." She paused at the door, hand on the handle. "And follow the card." Then she left. The door sealed behind her with a hydraulic hiss, and suddenly I was alone with the machines and the low, constant hum of electricity. I slipped the laminated card into my jacket pocket and told myself exactly what it was. A hazing ritual. Every isolated job had them. Campgrounds, research stations, offshore rigs. People who worked alone at night loved messing with the new guy. It broke the monotony, gave them something to laugh about later. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee from the break room pot and settled into the control chair. Brought the data feeds up on the main monitor. Everything looked normal. I pulled the card back out and read it properly. Fog Protocols 1. If the fog reaches the antenna tower before midnight, lock the control room door and do not exit the building too. During fog events, never respond to voices heard through the intercom system 3. If you see someone outside the station after 2:00 a.m., they are not lost. 4. Do not use exterior floodlights during dense fog unless instructed by Central Command. 5. If visibility drops below 5 meters and improves suddenly, note the time and remain inside for 30 minutes. That was it. No signature. No date. I snorted quietly into my coffee. Classic. Rules vague enough to sound ominous. Just grounded enough in real procedure to be plausible. Someone had put effort into it, I'd give them that. Fog protocols. Sure. I checked the current forecast. Clear skies. Low humidity. No fog advisories within 100 miles. The satellite imagery showed nothing but clean atmospheric flow rolling in from the west. I logged the initial readings and settled into the quiet rhythm of the night shift. Hours passed uneventfully. The machines hummed. Data scrolled. I ran a manual calibration check at 12:30 a.m. and noted nothing unusual. The wind stayed calm but present again, just enough to rattle the antenna cables faintly. At 12:41 a.m., the visibility sensor on the eastern perimeter flickered. Not alarm level, just a brief dip. I frowned and pulled up the feed. The camera image showed the tree line beyond the station, sharp and clear. Probably a glitch. At 12:44 a.m., the same sensor dipped again. This time it didn't come back up. I checked the others. North and south still clear. West normal. East dropped steadily. 10 meters. 8. 6. That didn't make sense. Fog didn't roll in from one direction like a wall. Not here. Not without a temperature shift. The thermometer readings stayed flat. I brought up the satellite feed again. I stood and walked to the narrow observation window on the east side of the control room. Outside, the forest looked the same as it had all night. Until it didn't. Something pale moved between the trees. Not fast. Not drifting. Advancing. A low, thick layer of fog slid forward, hugging the ground, swallowing trunks and brush as it came. It moved with purpose, smooth and silent, like it knew exactly where it was going. Toward the station. My watch read 12:47 a.m. I glanced at the antenna tower. Its red beacon blinked steadily, visible above the tree line. The fog reached it less than a minute later. I felt the weight of the laminated card in my pocket. Rule 1. If the fog reaches the antenna tower before midnight. I locked the control room door. Behind me, the intercom clicked on. And someone took a breath. The fog didn't roll in. It didn't creep, or drift, or swirl the way fog was supposed to. It advanced. I stood at the observation window, one hand still resting on the control room door handle, watching the forest disappear in clean, deliberate segments. First the ground, then the lower branches. Then entire trees, erased without sound. No wind. No moisture beating on the glass. No temperature change, just absence. The antenna beacon blinked red once more, then faded into a dull smear before vanishing entirely. The fog swallowed it like it had never existed. I checked my watch again, 12:49 a.m. The control room lights hummed overhead, steady and reassuring. But the world outside had gone flat and wrong, like someone had taken depth away from it. I stepped back to the console and pulled up the sensor dashboard. Visibility 2.3 meters. Temperature 48 degrees F. Barometric pressure stable. Humidity unchanged. That was impossible. Fog without humidity wasn't fog. It was something else. I pulled up the external camera feeds one by one. North. South. West. All of them showed the same thing. A pale wall pressed up against the station's perimeter lights, thick and uniform, like the edge of a blank page. The beams from the floodlights didn't scatter the way they should have. They just stopped, cut off sharply, as if the light itself had hit a solid surface and refused to go any farther. I leaned closer to the monitor. The image jittered. Not static. Not interference. More like a subtle distortion, the way heat waves bent light over asphalt in summer. Except this was cold, and dark, and moving closer. The east-facing camera flickered, then froze. A shape filled the frame. Not a silhouette. Not clearly human. Just the suggestion of something too close to the lens. Pale. Featureless. As if the camera couldn't agree on where the edges were. I felt a tightness settle in my chest. "This is Central Ridge Station," I said into the radio, keeping my voice level. "I'm seeing a rapid visibility drop inconsistent with forecast models. Can anyone confirm?" The radio answered with static. Not the usual hiss. This was softer. Thicker. Like sound trying to move through insulation. Then, underneath it, something else. A faint intake of air. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the speaker exactly. It felt closer than that. Like it was inside the radio casing itself, trapped behind the plastic. I waited. The breathing stopped. The radio went dead. No static. No carrier tone. Nothing. I lowered it slowly and set it on the console, like it might do something if I startled it. The station felt different now. Not darker. Not colder. Smaller. The fog pressed against the building, flattening the outside world, until the concrete walls felt like the only real thing left. Even the hum of the equipment seemed muffled, as if wrapped in cloth. I ran another diagnostic sweep. Sensors that should have agreed with each other didn't. The visibility sensor said 2 meters. The LiDAR feed claimed clear air beyond 10. The particulate counter spiked, then dropped, then spiked again. Data shouldn't argue with itself. I logged everything carefully, time-stamped each anomaly, and added a note for central review. My hands were steady, but I was suddenly very aware of how quiet the control room had become. No wind against the building. No distant wildlife. No background noise from the outside world at all. It reminded me of being underground. Like the time I'd toured a decommissioned missile silo in college. How the silence there had weight to it. Pressed against your eardrums, until you felt your own pulse as sound. I pulled the laminated card from my pocket again. Fog protocols. I reread Rule 1. I'd followed it. Rule 2 caught my eye this time. During fog events, never respond to voices heard through the intercom system. Voices, I muttered. Plural. I glanced at the intercom panel, mounted beside the main console. It was dark. No indicator lights. No active channel. Still, I stepped a little farther away from it. The exterior camera flickered again. This time, the distortion shifted. Pulled back slightly. Like whatever had been too close to the lens had stepped away. For half a second, I thought I saw movement. Then the image snapped back to empty fog. I wiped my palms on my jeans and forced myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The way they taught us during emergency training. This was just a weather anomaly. A rare one, sure, but still explainable. Temperature inversions did strange things. Atmospheric models missed edge cases all the time. That's what I told myself. At 1:07 a.m. the intercom clicked on. I didn't jump. Not outwardly. But every muscle in my body went tight at once. The panel light glowed green. No call indicator. No channel designation. Just open. I stared at it. Central Ridge Station, I said carefully, into the empty room. If this is command, please identify. Nothing answered. For a long moment, all I heard was my own breathing. Then, very softly, the intercom exhaled. Not words. Not static. Just breathe. Close. Slow. Familiar in the way all human breathing was familiar, even when it didn't belong. I took one step back. The laminated card felt heavy in my pocket, like it was pulling me down. The breathing stopped. The intercom light went dark. I stood there for a full minute, counting silently, just in case there was a protocol I hadn't read yet. When nothing else happened, I moved back to the console and forced myself to log the event. 8 intercom activated without signal. No verbal communication. Auditory anomaly resembling human respiration. Duration approx 6 seconds. As I typed, something shifted in my peripheral vision. The external camera feeds all glitched at once. Every monitor showed the same distortion now, a subtle warping at the center of each image, as if the fog was pressing inward from all directions at once. I leaned forward. The warping resolved into something almost recognizable. A darker shape, suspended in the fog. Standing too still. I swallowed. The intercom clicked on again. This time, it spoke. "Hey," a voice said, calm and familiar.
You there?
My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. And that was when I realized the rules hadn't been written to scare anyone. They'd been written because this part always came next. The voice coming through the intercom was Mark Ellis. There was no mistaking it. Same low register. Same slight rasp, like he'd spent too many winters breathing cold air. Same habit of letting the last word of a sentence fall a half step lower than the rest. Mark had worked nights at Central Ridge Station before me. 2 years ago, according to the personnel file. He'd quit without notice. Left his badge in the locker. Didn't answer follow-up calls. Just disappeared from the schedule and never came back. "Hey," the intercom said again. "You there?" My hand hovered inches from the console. Rule 2 burned in my mind. Never respond to voices heard through the intercom during fog events. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just listened. There was a pause on the line. Long enough that I wondered if I'd imagined the voice altogether. Then it came back, a little louder, a little closer somehow. "Look, I know it's late," Mark said. "But something's wrong with the tower. The east side braces aren't reading right. I tried to fix it, but I can't see a damn thing out here." The words were practical. Familiar. Exactly the kind of thing Mark would have said. He'd been the one who trained me during my daytime overlap shifts. Big on procedure. Big on equipment integrity. He used to say the weather didn't care about your excuses. So your data better be clean. I clenched my jaw. The intercom crackled softly, like a hand adjusting a microphone somewhere on the other end. "I could really use a second set of eyes," Mark continued. "Just need you to unlock the door and..." I took a slow step backward. My heel bumped the edge of the control console. The voice stopped mid-sentence. The silence that followed felt deliberate. Then Mark sighed. "Okay," he said. "Okay, that's fine. I get it. You're new. You're probably thinking this is some kind of joke." A quiet laugh followed. Soft. Self-deprecating. "That's fair." My stomach twisted. He wasn't wrong. That was what I'd thought earlier. A prank. A tradition. Something to keep night techs on their toes. The intercom hummed faintly. "You don't have to open the door," Mark said. "Just talk to me. Let me know you can hear me. That's all." I stayed silent. Seconds passed. I counted them in my head. 10. 20. 30. The air in the control room felt thick now, like breathing through fabric. I realized my shoulders were hunched. My muscles locked tight without my permission. When the voice came back, it had changed. Not in tone. In intent. "Hey," Mark said quietly. It's cold out here. The word cold landed differently than the others. Not as information. As a complaint. A shared human experience. I didn't bring my heavy jacket, he added. Didn't think I'd need it. Forecast said clear, remember? I remembered. We'd joked about it during my first week. How forecasts were only as good as the models, and models were only as good as the assumptions behind them. That fog came out of nowhere, Mark said. Just like tonight. My fingers curled into my palm. How long you been in there? He asked. Hour. 2. He didn't wait for an answer. I've been out here longer than that, he said. I can barely feel my hands. Something scraped softly in the background. Metal on concrete. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. Mark had a habit of tapping his flashlight against his thigh when he was cold. A nervous tic he didn't realize he had. Tap. Pause. Tap. My pulse thudded in my ears. The voice lowered, lost some of its professional edge. I know the rules, Mark said. I know what the card says. But rules aren't meant for situations like this. They're for worst-case scenarios. He exhaled slowly. This isn't that. The lie was gentle, carefully shaped. I stared at the intercom panel, at the dark plastic grill where the sound came from. It looked harmless. Ordinary. I just need you to let me in, Mark continued. Then we can log this whole thing together. Do it by the book. Another pause. Then, softer please. My throat tightened. The word hit something deeper than logic. Deeper than procedure. I thought of Mark the last time I'd seen him. Standing in the break room, pouring coffee he'd forget to drink. Talking about his daughter's soccer games. About how nights were easier once you got used to being alone. You stop hearing the quiet after a while, he'd said. That's when you know you belong out here. The intercom crackled again. You still there? Mark asked. His voice sounded tired now, not cold. Lonely. I closed my eyes. Rule 2 didn't say anything about listening. Only responding. I stayed quiet. The voice changed again. The work talk faded. The practical concerns dropped away. Hey, Mark said. You remember that time the generator tripped during the storm last spring? My eyes snapped open. No one outside the station knew about that. The report had been filed internally. I'd been on shift alone. Mark had come in early to help reset the system. You thought you broke it, he continued, almost smiling through the words. Kept apologizing like you were about to get fired. My hands were shaking now. You weren't, Mark said. You did everything right. I never told you that. A lump formed in my throat. That night, he went on, you called your brother on your break. Told him you were thinking about moving back east. Closer to family. I hadn't told anyone at work that. The intercom hissed softly, like breath between teeth. You still thinking about that? Mark asked. The voice wasn't coaxing anymore. It was intimate. Careful. You always hated being this far from home, he said. Said it made everything feel unreal. My stomach dropped. The fog pressed harder against the building. I could feel it, even through the concrete walls, like something leaning in to listen. I know you don't like it when things don't make sense, Mark said. You never have. The tapping sound returned. Tap. Pause. Tap. That's why you should open the door, he said gently. So we can talk face to face. Clear this up. I took another step back. My shoulders brushed the equipment rack behind me. The intercom went quiet. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then the voice came back one last time, not as Mark. As my father. Same cadence. Same steady calm. Same way he used to speak when he thought I was panicking. Son, the intercom said softly. You don't have to be scared. I sucked in a sharp breath. You're doing fine, my father continued. Just open the door. I'll take care of the rest. I slammed my hand down on the console. The intercom went dead. Every monitor in the room flickered at once. The external camera feed snapped back to life. And on the east-facing screen, something stood in the fog. Perfectly still. Waiting. The east-facing camera stabilized. No static. No snow. No distortion. Just fog. Thick, uniform fog rolling low across the ground, swallowing the floodlights in soft gray halos. The camera's timestamp ticked forward in the corner of the screen, calm and indifferent too. 17 a.m. Then I saw it. 30 meters out. Right where the service road curved past the antenna tower. A person stood there, not moving, not shifting weight, not reacting to the lights blasting down from the roof. Just standing. My first thought was absurdly normal. Someone got lost. My second thought arrived half a second later, colder and sharper. No one comes up here at night. I leaned closer to the monitor. The figure didn't flicker when the fog passed through it. The mist moved around them, breaking softly against an outline that remained perfectly defined. I checked the thermal overlay. Nothing. No heat signature. Just a void where a human body should have been burning bright against the cold. My mouth went dry. I toggled the zoom. The image magnified smoothly, motor humming faintly inside the console. The figure grew larger on the screen, details resolving one by one. Boots. Heavy duty, insulated. Same model issued to station personnel. Cargo pants. Weather-resistant fabric, reinforced knees. A jacket. Dark, reflective striping on the sleeves. My jacket. The one hanging on the back of the chair behind me. The figure stood with their back to the camera, shoulders squared, posture familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. I knew that stance. It was how I stood when I was tired. When I was thinking, the floodlights should have cast a shadow across the gravel. They didn't. The ground beneath the figure remained uniformly gray, untouched by silhouette or shape. Light hit the body. Light hit the ground. But nothing connected the two. I swallowed hard. The fog muffled everything outside, but inside the control room I could hear my own breathing now, shallow and fast. I reached for the rule card without looking. My fingers brushed the cracked laminate, warm from my body heat. I didn't need to read it. The words surfaced on their own, dragged up from wherever my brain had buried them. If you see yourself outside the station, turn off all exterior lights. I stared at the screen. The figure hadn't moved, hadn't turned, hadn't acknowledged the camera. It was waiting. My hand hovered over the lighting controls. Killing the exterior lights meant plunging the entire perimeter into darkness. No floodlights. No tower beacons. No visual confirmation of anything beyond the control room windows. Every safety instinct I had screamed against it. You don't turn off the lights when something is out there. You turn them on brighter. You make yourself visible. You watch. But the rule hadn't said if you think you see yourself. It said if you see yourself. And I was looking at my own uniform. My own build. My own posture. I flipped the first switch. The southern floodlights died instantly. The camera feed adjusted, night vision kicking in. The fog turned grainy green, the figure a darker silhouette against it. Still no heat. Still no shadow. I flipped the second switch. The tower lights went dark, red warning beacons blinking out one by one until the antenna vanished into the mist. The figure remained. Closer now somehow. Not physically. Visually. As if the darkness had collapsed the distance between us. I flipped the last switch. Everything outside went black. The monitors showed nothing but static night vision haze. No figure. No fog. No road. Just empty green noise. I exhaled shakily. For a moment, just one, I thought I'd done it. that whatever rule I'd followed had worked. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't come through the intercom, didn't come through the radio, didn't come through any speaker at all. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. From the door behind me. I froze. The knock came again. 3 taps. Evenly spaced. Not urgent. Not aggressive. Polite. Like someone who expected to be let in. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The control room windows reflected my own face back at me, pale and tight-eyed, floating in the darkness. Behind that reflection was only black. No fog. No lights. No world. Another knock. Closer this time. Right on the metal. I clenched my fists. The rule card burned against my ribs. I didn't remember a rule about knocking. That scared me more than the figure ever had. The door handle rattled gently. Not being forced. Just tested. A familiar voice spoke from the other side. Calm. Neutral. Professional. Control, this is Night Technician, it said. My voice. Same pitch. Same cadence. Same slight hesitation before consonants. I've got a visual issue out here, it continued. Fog's thicker than expected. I need you to let me in so I can log it. I squeezed my eyes shut. The handle turned again. Stopped. Then a final knock. Harder this time. More insistent. Open the door, my voice said softly. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And somewhere, deep in the fog outside, something smiled. The knocking didn't stop. It stayed exactly the same. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Not louder. Not faster. Not desperate. Patient. The kind of knocking you use when you're confident the door will open eventually. I stood with my back to the control console, staring at the steel door like it might blink if I looked away. The room felt smaller now. The walls closer. The air heavier. Through the narrow reinforced window in the door, I could see a shape. A human outline, standing close enough that the fog outside pressed up against the glass around it, curling and thinning at the edges like smoke meeting a barrier. The figure didn't move, didn't shift its weight, didn't hunch against the cold. Just stood there, waiting. The knocking stopped. For one terrible second, I thought it was over. Then the voice spoke. Right through the door. Right through the metal and insulation and everything I thought separated inside from outside. Open the door. My voice. Same breath pattern. Same slight rasp in the throat. I can't stay out here much longer. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek. The pain grounded me, sharp and immediate, a reminder that I was still here. Still myself. The rule card felt like a weight against my chest. I pulled it free with shaking hands. The text blurred at first. My eyes wouldn't focus. I forced them to. Never open the door while fog is present. Even at sunrise. The fog outside the window thickened, pressed closer, as if listening. The handle turned slowly. Stopped. Another knock. 3 taps. I know what the card says. My voice continued, calm and reasonable. I helped write those procedures, remember? I shook my head, a small movement, like that might dislodge the sound. You're tired, it said. You've been alone all night. You're overthinking this. A pause. I'm freezing. The figure outside leaned closer to the glass. I could see the outline of a face now. Mine. Features flattened and distorted by the frosted pane, but unmistakable. No condensation from breath. No fogging of the glass. Just a face pressed close enough that I should have seen warmth. There was none. Open the door, it said again. We'll log the anomaly together. Just like we always do. My hand drifted toward the lock before I realized what I was doing. I yanked it back. The door rattled. Not violently. Testing. Like fingers checking whether a latch had been fully engaged. Do you remember your first night here? The voice asked. I squeezed my eyes shut. You couldn't sleep, it continued. You kept waking up thinking you'd missed a sensor alert. That was true. You stood right where I'm standing now, it said, staring at the door, wondering if this place was a mistake. My throat tightened. You told yourself you'd give it 6 months, the voice went on. Then a year. Then you'd decide. The knocking resumed. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. You're still deciding, it said softly. The fog pressed harder against the glass, tendrils curling along the edges of the window frame, seeping into seams that shouldn't have let anything through. A thin line of white slid along the bottom of the door. I stared at it. No, that wasn't possible. The door was sealed. Weather strip, inspected monthly. The fog didn't care. It crept inward, slow and deliberate, like it knew time was on its side. My heart hammered against my ribs. The voice dropped lower, more intimate. You don't have to be alone, it said. The words landed heavy. You never were supposed to be. The fog slid farther under the door, spilling across the floor in a thin, rolling layer. It wasn't wet. Didn't bead or cling. It just existed. Inside. My breath came fast now, puffing white in front of my face. Even though the room temperature hadn't changed, the handle turned again. This time, it didn't stop right away. Metal clicked softly. The lock strained. I backed away until my shoulders hit the console. The monitors flickered. The east-facing camera came back online without being touched. The figure was no longer outside. The camera showed the control room. Showed me. Standing there, watching the door. The fog rolled thicker beneath it. And somewhere in the building, something exhaled. The door never opened, but the fog still came in. At first, it was barely noticeable. A thin haze curling out of the ventilation grates near the ceiling, drifting down in lazy spirals like breath in cold air. It didn't rush, didn't surge. It leaked. I stared up at the vents, heart pounding, waiting for the blast of cold that should have followed. It never came. The fog wasn't cold. It wasn't damp either. It moved through the control room like a presence, not a substance sliding along surfaces, pooling briefly in corners before thinning again. When it brushed against my skin, there was no chill, no moisture, just a faint metallic scent. Copper, like old coins warmed in a hand, or blood you haven't tasted yet. I backed toward the console, every step careful, deliberate. The fog parted around my legs as I moved, then closed behind me, erasing the path I'd taken. The station lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied. The monitors didn't. The main weather display, normally a clean grid of live telemetry, glitched and refreshed. Numbers rolled backward. Timestamps rewound 2221, 214, 158. I stared at the screen. No, I whispered. The word vanished into the fog before it traveled a foot. The data settled. Wind speed 12 mph. Visibility 0.3 kilometers. Barometric pressure stable. The date in the corner read March 14, 2006. My breath caught. That was impossible. The station hadn't even been automated then. Half the sensors hadn't existed. I reached for the keyboard. The keys felt warm. Too warm. I tapped a command to pull the system logs. The screen hesitated. Then opened a file tree I'd never seen before. Fog Event Archive. My chest tightened. The list scrolled on its own. Dozens of entries. Hundreds. Each one labeled with a date and a name. I scanned them, pulse racing. Some names were marked transferred. Others resigned. Too many simply read no further record. Then I saw it. My name. Twice. Once under a date from 3 years ago. Once under a date from 12 years before I'd been hired. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the rolling chair. That's not possible, I said aloud. The fog swallowed the words. The radio crackled to life. Not static. Voices. Layered. Overlapping. Too many to separate. You hear me? Don't answer. We thought it was protocol. It knows your voice. I slapped the radio off. The sound kept going. Not from the speaker. From the walls. From the vents. From inside the station itself. I recognized the voices. My brother. My former supervisor. Mark. My father. All talking at once. None of them speaking to each other. All of them speaking to me. The fog thickened, rising now to waist height, swirling around the console legs. The metallic smell grew stronger, sharper. I turned toward the equipment rack. The maintenance terminal screen glowed faintly. I hadn't powered it on. Lines of text crawled upward. Old reports. Handwritten notes transcribed into digital form. Subject complied with Rule 1. Failure occurred at Rule 4. Subject believed interior space was secure. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just happening to me. It had happened before. The station wasn't a shelter. It was a filter. A place where something tested boundaries. The fog brushed my face now. Not touching. Hovering. I tasted copper on my tongue. The door behind me creaked softly. Not opening. Just settling. Like something leaning its weight against it from the outside. The east-facing monitor flickered again. It showed the control room. But it wasn't empty anymore. I was still there, standing where I was now, but behind me, just barely visible through the haze, were others. Figures. Outlines. Men and women in outdated uniforms. Different eras. Different cuts of fabric. All facing the same direction. All watching the door, none of them casting shadows. The radio voices stopped at once. Silence fell. Heavy, absolute. Then a single sentence echoed through the station, not spoken aloud, not broadcast but understood. You're not the first. The fog reached the console. The rule card slipped from my fingers and vanished into it. And I finally understood what the station really was. Not a place to observe the weather, but a place where the weather observed you. The filing cabinet was older than the station. It sat against the far wall of the auxiliary room, half hidden behind a stack of obsolete equipment crates, stamped with faded federal inventory codes. The metal was dented, paint chipped to bare steel along the edges. One drawer permanently stuck halfway open, like it had given up on pretending to close. I didn't remember seeing it before. That didn't mean it hadn't been there. The fog thinned as I moved away from the control console, reluctant. Like it didn't want me leaving that space. It curled low around my boots but didn't rise higher, as if there were rules it followed too. I pulled the stuck drawer the rest of the way open. Inside were folders. Not official ones. No barcodes. No standardized labels. No digital cross-reference. Just manila folders with names written in pen. Some dates. Some titles. Night technician incident notes. Fog event observations. Personal addendum not for records. My pulse quickened. I grabbed the nearest folder and opened it. The paper inside was yellowed, edges curled. Ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was neat. Careful. The kind of handwriting someone used when they wanted to be taken seriously. Fog arrived at 1:42. Visibility outside dropped to near zero. Interior remained clear for approximately 11 minutes. I swallowed. Heard knocking at door at 2:03. Knock pattern was consistent. Did not open. I flipped the page. Voice came through intercom. Sounded like myself. Used phrases I had not spoken aloud. A line had been drawn under the next sentence, pressed hard enough to crease the paper. It learns faster if you listen. My fingers trembled as I set the folder aside and opened another. Different handwriting. Messier. The words leaned to the right, like they were trying to escape the margins. This is not weather. This is behavior. I turned the page. Halfway down, the writing stopped. Mid-sentence. The pen stroke trailed off into nothing. The next folder was worse. The handwriting started strong, confident, almost dismissive. Probably a psychological effect. Isolation plus fog equals hallucinations. Then the tone shifted. The letters grew larger, less controlled. Fog entered through vents again. Smells like metal. Sounds like breathing. The final line was written in block letters, as if the writer had been afraid cursive would betray them. IT learned my voice. I closed the folder and leaned back against the cabinet. My legs felt weak. Every report described the same pattern. Fog. Voices. A figure. Rules followed until one wasn't. No reports mentioned violence. No attacks. No sudden deaths. Just gradual erosion. Learning. Copying. Replacing. I opened another folder. This one was thicker. More pages. Multiple dates. Same name on each. Someone who'd worked here for years. First fog event dismissed as anomaly. Second fog event recognized repetition. Third fog event, it began anticipating responses. My chest tightened. Stopped answering intercom. Stopped speaking aloud during fog. Still, it spoke. The final page was folded in half. I opened it carefully. It does not want the body. It wants the position. I stared at the words until they blurred. The fog didn't kill. It took over. One voice at a time. One routine at a time. One role at a time. That was why the station kept running. Why the data never stopped. Why replacements were hired, instead of investigations launched. I slid the folder back and opened the last one in the drawer. No name. No date. Just a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was precise, familiar. My own. If you're reading this, it means you made it far enough to look. That's good. My breath caught. The fog isn't trying to get inside. It's trying to stay. A chill ran through me. It can only do that if someone is here to maintain the station. To log the data. To answer the calls. My heart hammered. Do not think of it as an intruder. Think of it as a successor. The page ended with a final sentence, written slower, heavier. There is one last rule they don't put on the card. The lights flickered. The fog thickened behind me. Somewhere in the station, something shifted, adjusting, preparing, like it knew I was close to understanding. I turned the page. There was nothing else written. But on the back, pressed so lightly it was almost invisible, was an indentation. A sentence that had been written, then erased. I traced it with my thumb. The words rose in my mind without sound. When the fog learns your voice completely, it's already too late. The radio crackled once, then fell silent. And somewhere deep in the station, a new rule waited to be followed. The fog began to thin just before dawn. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It loosened its grip on the station in slow, reluctant strands, pulling back from the corners, lifting from the floor like breath finally released. The metallic smell faded first. Then the pressure. Then the silence. I didn't move. I sat on the floor beside the filing cabinet, rule card clenched in my hand, afraid that, if I stood too soon, the fog would remember me and come rushing back. The station lights steadied. No flicker. No hum distortion. Just normal, reliable electricity. The control monitors refreshed. Live data. Correct timestamps. Outside visibility climbed from 0 to 20 meters, then 50, then clear. Sunlight crept through the narrow windows, pale and gray, touching the edges of the control room like it was afraid to come fully inside. I waited for something to speak. Nothing did. I waited for knocking. For breathing. For my voice. Nothing came. The fog was gone. I pushed myself to my feet slowly, every muscle aching, like I'd run for miles without realizing it. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened monitor screens, pale, hollow-eyed, but unmistakably mine. I was still here. I crossed the room and stood at the door. The handle was cold. Normal. Solid. I rested my forehead against the metal for just a second, letting myself breathe. That was when I noticed the card. The fog protocols. It felt thinner in my hand. Lighter. I flipped it over. Where there had once been blank laminate, faint text now bled through from beneath the plastic, as if it had always been there, waiting for the right conditions to be seen. The last rule. Written smaller than the rest. Pressed so deep into the card it had warped the laminate. If the fog stays past sunrise, leave the station without looking back. I swallowed. Do not acknowledge anyone calling your name. My grip tightened. There must always be someone inside when it clears. My stomach dropped. Understanding came quietly. Not like fear. Like resignation. The fog hadn't failed. It had completed a cycle. I opened the door. The outside world greeted me like nothing had happened. The forest stood still and damp, washed clean by morning mist. Birds called from the trees. The antenna tower loomed above, solid and inert, blinking calmly in the daylight. No footprints in the gravel. No disturbance. Just a perfectly ordinary dawn. I stepped out onto the concrete pad and pulled the door shut behind me. It sealed with a heavy, final sound. I didn't turn around. I walked. Down the service road, past the tower, toward the ridgeline where my truck was parked. Halfway there I heard it. Hey. My name, spoken gently. From behind me. Every nerve in my body screamed to stop, to turn, to confirm that it was over, that I hadn't imagined everything. I kept walking. My hands shook. My breath came uneven. The voice followed. Calm. Familiar. You forgot your jacket. Closer now. Right behind me. I tasted copper. The rule burned in my mind. Do not acknowledge anyone calling your name. I didn't answer. Didn't slow. Didn't look back. The voice sighed. Not angry. Not disappointed. Almost fond. Then it faded, swallowed by the ordinary sounds of morning. I reached my truck and climbed in, slamming the door harder than necessary. My hands fumbled with the ignition before finally finding the key. The engine turned over. I drove. Didn't check the mirrors. Didn't look back at the station. I didn't stop driving until the road met the highway and the sun broke fully over the hills. By the time I reached the nearest town, my hands had stopped shaking. By noon, the station supervisor called. Her voice was normal. Professional. She asked if I was okay. I told her the fog event had cleared at sunrise. She thanked me for logging it, said a replacement would cover the next night shift. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I turned in my badge that afternoon. They didn't ask why. 2 weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I shouldn't have checked. But I did. The station posted a routine update online. A short clip from the security system, uploaded automatically as part of a maintenance audit. Time-stamped 6:14 a.m. The control room. Clean, orderly. Sunlight filtering through the windows. A technician sat at the console, typing steadily. Back straight, posture familiar. I leaned closer to the screen. The technician paused, slowly turned in their chair, looked directly into the camera. At me, it was my face, rested, calm, alert, wearing my jacket. The figure reached up and adjusted the radio clipped to their shoulder. Then, with practiced ease, they pressed the transmit button. Central Ridge Station reporting, my voice said, clear and confident. Night shift complete. Fog event resolved. Systems nominal. The screen went black. The video ended. And somewhere, far above the forest, the station continued to operate. Just like it always had. Just like it always would. As long as someone stayed behind when the fog cleared.